My name is Rowan Ashworth, and I am 33 years old. I live in a small, reclaimed timber cabin on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, where the air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and the wild botanicals I often use in my work. Here, with the ancient, rolling Blue Ridge Mountains as my constant companions and the French Broad River whispering its timeless stories nearby, I run my small studio, Hearthstone Carvings. I shape fallen wood into sculptures that echo the natural world, carve intricate reliefs that tell quiet tales, and sometimes I teach small workshops on finding art in the overlooked. It is a life built slowly, with calloused hands and a seeking heart, a life of deliberate simplicity. Last month, just as the flame azaleas were setting the hillsides ablaze with their fiery orange, I received the text message that has become an unwelcome annual tradition. It was from my mother. Dearest Rowan, terribly sorry, but Starfall Hollow is simply overflowing for the family reunion this year. We'll have to catch you next time. Starfall Hollow is our family's sprawling, rustic lodge nestled deep in a valley beside Moonstone Lake, a place that holds the echoes of my most cherished childhood memories. The words, couched in their usual polite regret, still carried the familiar sting of a door gently, but firmly, closed in my face. Hours later, an accidental scroll through my older brother Gideon's rarely updated social media feed delivered the fuller, harsher truth. He'd posted a picture, ostensibly of his children excitedly packing, but in the background, on a large corkboard in his den, was a meticulously printed guest list for the Starfall Hollow reunion. My breath hitched. I zoomed in, my heart sinking with each familiar name. I counted. 104 people. All three of my siblings, Gideon, Isabel, and Leo, along with their partners and children. Aunts, uncles, cousins, some of whom I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Even Dad's old university colleagues and their families. And then, at the bottom of the list, a small, handwritten note in my father's precise script, confirmed bookings for the 4 lakeside cabins at Hemlock Point for auxiliary guests. 104 people, plus 4 additional cabins. And still, somehow, no room for me. For years, I have been the quiet anomaly in the Ashworth family narrative, the one whose path veered from the well-trodden road. Despite Hearthstone Carvings gaining a quiet recognition, with pieces in several respected Appalachian craft galleries and a feature in a regional arts journal, the pattern of my exclusion felt less like an oversight and more like a carefully maintained distance. But this year, as the scent of rhododendrons drifted in through my open studio window, a new resolve began to take root within me, quiet but unyielding. This year, something had to change. The Starfall Hollow reunion wasn't just a casual family get-together. It was the sacred keeper of our family's collective memory, a tradition woven into the very warp and weft of my being. It was lovingly established by my grandparents, Elias and Thea Ashworth, nearly 60 years ago. Grandpa Elias, a man whose hands were as gnarled and wise as the ancient oaks he so admired, and whose laughter could make the very timbers of the lodge hum, would gather us children around the massive stone hearth. He'd tell tales of how he and Grandma Thea, a woman whose spirit was as vibrant and resilient as the mountain laurel she cultivated, discovered this hidden valley during a hiking trip long before any proper road led to it. He'd gesture towards the constellation of waterfalls that gave the hollow its name, cascading like liquid starlight down the mossy cliffs. This place, he'd say, his blue eyes twinkling with an almost mystical light, it sang to our souls. It told us it was waiting to become a sanctuary for our family, a place to gather and remember who we are. And it became that sanctuary. They bought the land with their life savings and, with the help of local craftsmen, built Starfall Hollow, a magnificent lodge of stone and timber that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside. I was barely old enough to walk when I first experienced its magic, and those summers became the luminous threads in the tapestry of my childhood. I remember the cool, mossy scent of the forest floor as my siblings and I tumbled out of the car, dizzy with freedom and anticipation. Gideon, always the natural leader, would immediately organize grand adventures to explore uncharted caves. Isabel, even as a child possessing an innate sense of order and propriety, would assist Grandma Thea in arranging wildflowers in handcrafted pottery vases. Leo, my younger brother and often my quiet co-conspirator, would join me by the clear, cold waters of Moonstone Lake, where we'd search for salamanders and whisper our secret wishes to the dragonflies. It was Grandpa Elias who first truly saw the artist stirring within me. While the others were engaged in more boisterous pursuits, he would take me on what he called listening walks through the old-growth forest. He wouldn't point and name. Instead, he'd encourage me to simply be, to notice the intricate patterns of lichen on a rock, the way sunlight dappled through the dense canopy, the subtle shift of colors in a bird's feather. "You feel the heartbeat of the world differently, little Rowan," he'd murmur, his voice as soft and comforting as fallen leaves. "You see the stories hidden in the silence, in the wood, in the stone." He carved a small, portable drawing board for me from a piece of cherry wood, and I would spend countless hours sketching the reflections of the mountains in the lake, the delicate architecture of a spider's web, the expressive faces I saw in the gnarled roots of trees. Grandma Thea, with her warm, earthy smile, would bring me cups of mint tea and slices of her famous apple cake, her presence a silent, unwavering affirmation. "Your hands hold a special magic, child," she'd say, her own hands, dusted with flour or soil, gently touching my hair. "Don't ever let anyone persuade you to put it aside." When I announced, at 18, that I intended to pursue a degree in fine arts with a focus on sculpture and traditional woodworking at Penland School of Craft, rather than the business administration program at Duke University that my parents had meticulously planned for me, it was Grandma Thea and Grandpa Elias who stood as my unwavering champions. My father, Marcus Ashworth, a man who had built Ashworth Timber and Development into a regional powerhouse through sheer force of will and pragmatism, made no attempt to conceal his profound disappointment. "Art is a commendable pastime, Rowan," he'd stated, his voice calm but heavy with disapproval, during a particularly strained family dinner. "It is not, however, a reliable foundation for a secure or respectable life." My mother, Eleanor, whose own life had been dedicated to cultivating our family's social standing in Asheville and managing the charitable Ashworth Foundation, merely adjusted the pearls at her throat. Her eloquent silence, a more potent echo of my father's sentiment than any spoken words could have been. The summer after my first year at Penland, our world was irrevocably altered. Grandpa Elias suffered a massive stroke while working in his beloved terraced garden overlooking Moonstone Lake. Grandma Thea, his steadfast companion and soulmate for over half a century, seemed to lose her own vital spark. She followed him just 4 months later, her vibrant spirit fading like the last autumn leaf clinging to a branch. Their absence left an unfillable void in our family, a profound silence that even the annual gatherings at Starfall Hollow could no longer quite dispel. They left the hollow jointly to my parents, along with a beautifully handwritten letter, penned in Grandma Thea's graceful script, expressing their deepest wish that the tradition of the summer reunion continue, that Starfall Hollow remain a beacon of joy, connection, and creative rejuvenation for all future generations of Ashworths. And the reunions did continue, though their essence had subtly, irrevocably changed. My parents, now the official custodians of this cherished legacy, began to orchestrate the gatherings with a new layer of formality and purpose. What had once been spontaneous, joy-infused affairs, characterized by laughter echoing through the trees, shared potluck meals on long trestle tables, and impromptu musical evenings around the fire pit, slowly morphed into more structured, almost corporate events. The guest lists expanded far beyond immediate family to include my father's business associates, influential figures from my mother's philanthropic circles, and distant relatives whose connections to our core family felt tenuous at best. Starfall Hollow, once a sacred space for authentic connection and quiet contemplation, began to feel more like a meticulously curated stage for my parents to showcase their version of familial success and social influence. Despite their quiet, persistent disapproval of my chosen vocation, I poured every ounce of my being into my studies at Penland, and then into the slow, patient process of building hearthstone carvings. While many of my peers pursued more conventional artistic careers in larger cities, I was drawn back to the mountains, to the elemental beauty of wood and stone, to the quiet satisfaction of creating with my own hands. By the time I formally established my studio, I had a small but distinctive portfolio of work and a clear, albeit unconventional, vision for my future. Today, Hearthstone Carvings has earned a quiet reputation for its unique, nature-infused artistry. My sculptures reside in private collections and public spaces, my carved panels adorn the hearths of thoughtfully designed homes, and my small workshops attract kindred spirits seeking to reconnect with their own creativity. Yet, these achievements, these tangible manifestations of my unreliable path, never seemed to register with any genuine warmth or recognition from my parents. The first year the "No room at the Hollow" message arrived, I was 29. The text came about 10 days before the scheduled reunion. "Dearest Rowan, we're keeping things very, very small and intimate this year. Just the immediate children and grandchildren. The Hollow is simply bursting at the seams as it is. We'll have to make it up to you soon." The words, though apologetic in tone, carried a sharp, unexpected sting. But I rationalized. Perhaps they truly are trying to simplify. Maybe they need some quiet time with just their direct descendants, without the usual throng. I tried to convince myself it didn't truly matter, but that night, the old, familiar ache of being an outsider, even within the supposed sanctuary of my own family, brought a quiet cascade of tears. The truth, as it so often does, emerged through the brightly lit window of social media. Isabel, my older sister, posted a series of impeccably curated photos, not just my siblings and their children, but a sprawling assembly of at least 70 people, aunts, uncles, cousins, even some of my parents' newer acquaintances from the country club. When I later mentioned, as casually as I could manage, that I'd seen the photos and it looked like a truly wonderful gathering, Isabel became flustered, her usual poise momentarily ruffled. "Oh, Rowan, darling, you know Mom and Dad. They just assumed you'd be utterly swamped with your commissions for hearthstone carvings. You're always so incredibly dedicated to your work." Her excuse felt thin and transparent, a flimsy veil over a more deliberate, more painful reality. Each of my siblings navigates their relationship with our parents, and with the unspoken family hierarchy, in their own distinct way. Gideon, at 39, is the eldest, the designated successor to Ashworth Timber and Development, living in a grand, historic home in Asheville's Biltmore Forest with his wife, Caroline, and their 3 impeccably mannered children. He is, in my father's estimation, the epitome of sensible choices and tangible success. Isabel, 36, married a successful cardiologist and has cultivated a life of effortless elegance and social prominence that mirrors our mother's own. She chairs numerous charity committees, hosts flawless fundraising galas, and her 2 daughters are always perfectly turned out. Then there's Leo, my younger brother, now 28. He's a high school history teacher, married to a kind, grounded woman named Hannah who works as a librarian. They live a quieter, more modest life in a small town an hour outside Asheville, and of all my siblings, Leo has always possessed a gentler, more perceptive spirit, though he rarely, if ever, directly challenges our parents' established narratives. And then, there is me, Rowan. 33, unmarried, no children, tending my little workshop, as my father sometimes refers to hearthstone carvings with a dismissive wave of his hand, instead of pursuing a proper, substantial career. The outlier. The quiet disappointment. The artist. For 2 more years, the pattern held firm. The same gently worded text, the same underlying message of exclusion. And each year, the glossy, smiling images on social media relentlessly told the true story. I built a protective wall of stoic indifference around my heart, pouring my energy into my work, into the solace of the wood and the stone, telling myself that their approval, or lack thereof, did not define my worth. But this year, the sight of that corkboard, the stark, undeniable 104 confirmed guests, and the note about the four auxiliary lakeside cabins felt different. It was no longer a subtle slight. It was a clear, unequivocal, and deeply painful statement. My hand trembled as I held my phone, the screen blurring before my eyes. 104 guests. I could decipher the names, all my siblings, their partners, their children. My mother's sister, Aunt Beatrice, and her entire boisterous, sprawling family from Charleston. Even Dad's former business mentor, a man he hadn't seen in over a decade, and his wife. Everyone, it seemed, from every corner of their lives, except me. I sent a carefully composed text message to Gideon. The Starfall Hollow reunion plans look absolutely incredible. Such an enormous gathering this year. His reply was swift and characteristically enthusiastic. It's going to be the biggest one yet, Ro. Mom and Dad are really pulling out all the stops. Legendary. I forced a casual, almost detached tone into my next message. Wow, 104 people. They must be utilizing every single nook and cranny of the Hollow. How on earth did you get such a precise count? His response landed like a lead weight in the pit of my stomach. Dad's been a bit of a benevolent dictator with the master list. You know how he is. Had to book out all 4 of the Hemlock Point cabins down by the lake just to accommodate everyone who RSVP'd yes. Auxiliary cabins. The not enough space excuse, already worn thin from overuse, disintegrated into nothingness, like mist under a harsh sun. I slowly set my phone down on the worn, scarred surface of my workbench and walked to the large, north-facing window of my studio. The familiar, panoramic view of the mountains, usually a source of profound peace and inspiration, today felt like a silent, indifferent witness to my pain. Tears welled, hot and unexpected, blurring the usually crisp outline of the distant peaks. It wasn't about a lack of physical space. It had never, ever been about space. It was about me. A wave of grief, sharp and piercing, washed over me, not just for this most recent, most blatant exclusion, but for all the accumulated years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I didn't quite fit, didn't quite belong, wasn't quite enough. My chest tightened, an old, familiar ache, as if my heart were being squeezed by an invisible hand. I sank onto the rustic wooden stool I often used when sketching, pulling my knees to my chest, a posture of self-protection I hadn't assumed since childhood. For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, motionless, replaying a silent film reel of past slights, the family dinners where my modest artistic achievements were met with polite, fleeting nods while Gideon's latest corporate acquisition was dissected and lauded with prolonged enthusiasm. The Christmas I received a generic, impersonal gift card to a department store while my siblings unwrapped thoughtful, individually chosen presents. The countless family photographs where I seemed to be, perpetually, almost strategically, positioned on the very edge of the frame, easily cropped out if the composition required it. When the initial tide of raw emotion finally began to recede, leaving behind a tender, bruised weariness, I reached for my phone and dialed Maya's number. We'd met during a summer residency at Penland years ago, both of us quiet observers drawn to the tactile beauty of handcrafted objects and the solace of creative expression. Maya was a textile artist, her hands always stained with indigo or madder root, her spirit as warm, vibrant, and resilient as the intricate patterns she wove. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm, steady, and immediately reassuring. They did it again. Maya, I managed, my voice thick with unshed tears, the words catching in my throat. The Starfall Hollow reunion. Oh, Rowan, she sighed, a wealth of immediate understanding and empathy in her tone. What happened this time, my friend? 104 people, Maya, I choked out. They rented 4 extra cabins down by the lake to fit everyone in. There was a brief pause, then Maya's voice, usually so gentle and melodic, took on a firmer, more resolute edge. Rowan, that's not just thoughtless or careless. That's deliberately cruel. There's no other word for it. Am I overreacting? I whispered, the old self-doubt creeping in. Maybe there's some perfectly logical reason I'm just not seeing. Stop it. Right now. Maya's voice was unequivocal, cutting through my spiraling uncertainty. You know, deep in your heart, that this isn't about logistics or practicalities. This is about them, Rowan, not about you. They are profoundly uncomfortable with the authentic, beautiful life you've courageously chosen for yourself because it doesn't align with their narrow, conventional definitions of success and worthiness. And this petty, painful exclusion is how they passively, aggressively express that discomfort. Deep down, in the quietest, most honest corner of my soul, I knew she was right. My parents had never truly forgiven me, or perhaps never truly understood my decision for choosing the uncertain, often solitary path of an artist over the secure, socially approved trajectory they had envisioned for me. But acknowledging that truth, however liberating, didn't magically anesthetize the raw, aching wound. That night, sleep was a distant, unattainable shore. Memories of past family gatherings, both joyful and painful, swirled like fallen leaves in a restless autumn wind. I remembered the Thanksgiving when my father had proudly enumerated Gideon's and Isabel's recent professional triumphs and charitable board appointments, then, turning to me with an almost pitying smile, had said, and Rowan is, well, Rowan is still diligently pursuing her artistic endeavors in her little workshop. I recalled the Mother's Day brunch where Mom had spoken wistfully of her longing for more grandchildren to fill the halls of Starfall Hollow, her gaze flicking pointedly towards me before she added, with a sigh, of course, one must first find a suitable, stable partner, mustn't one, dear? Always the subtle, artfully delivered barbs, the gentle, almost imperceptible reminders that I was somehow falling short of their unstated, yet overwhelmingly palpable, expectations. Around 3 a.m, hollow-eyed and heartsore, feeling utterly adrift, I impulsively called Leo, my younger brother. I knew his wife, Hannah, was an early riser for her library job, and sometimes Leo would be up with her. Do you know that I wasn't invited to Starfall Hollow this year? I asked, bypassing any preamble, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. A silence stretched across the line, heavy and uncomfortable, filled only with the faint crackle of static. Mom mentioned that you might be too swamped with your commissions and your teaching schedule to make it up this year. Rowan, he finally said, his voice laced with an uneasy sympathy that somehow made the hurt even sharper. Did you question that, Leo? I pressed, my voice quiet but insistent, a tremor running through it. Did anyone in the family even think to ask me if I was busy, if I wanted to come? Rowan, you know how Mom and Dad are, he said, sounding tired. They handled all the invitations, the whole master plan. It's always been their domain. They invited 104 people, Leo, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They rented 4 extra cabins at Hemlock Point to accommodate everyone. Another, even longer pause. I could almost hear him struggling, caught between his loyalty to our parents and his innate sense of fairness. Look, he said finally, his voice softening with a genuine, if helpless, sorrow. You know they don't fully understand your world, your lifestyle. Maybe if you tried a bit harder to connect with them on their terms, to fit in a little more. My lifestyle? I echoed, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. You mean my studio, the one I built from the ground up with my own hands? The fact that I support myself quite comfortably, doing work that I love, work that brings beauty and meaning to others. That's not what I meant, Ro, he backtracked, sounding flustered and defensive. It's just, you've always marched to the beat of your own drum, Rowan. You know that. You've always been different. Different doesn't mean I deserve to be systematically, repeatedly, excluded from my own family, I thought, the words a silent scream in my heart. But I didn't say them aloud. Maybe you should just call Mom tomorrow, Leo suggested, his voice regaining a hopeful, placating tone. I'm sure this is all just a big, unfortunate misunderstanding. I ended the call without replying, a profound sense of desolation washing over me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deeply ingrained, painfully consistent pattern, one that I had, in my own quiet, accommodating way, allowed to continue for far too long by absorbing the hurt, by retreating into myself, by making myself smaller. Morning dawned over the Blue Ridge Mountains, cool and clear, the air fresh with the scent of pine and damp earth. But as the sun climbed higher, burning away the early morning mist that clung to the valleys, a fragile, new clarity began to emerge within me, like a delicate fern unfurling after a long winter. I made a pot of strong, dark roast coffee, the rich aroma mingling with the familiar, comforting scents of cedarwood, beeswax, and dried herbs from my studio. My gaze fell upon the awards and magazine articles framed on my workshop wall, small, tangible acknowledgments of the meaningful, authentic life I had painstakingly cultivated, on my own terms, in alignment with my deepest values. I had, in my own quiet way, honored the legacy of Grandpa Elias and Grandma Thea, their unwavering belief in my magic hands and my unique way of seeing the world. And yet, for so many years, I had subtly, almost unconsciously, been seeking validation, acceptance, a sense of belonging, from people who seemed either incapable of, or unwilling to, truly see me, to truly value the essence of who I was. An idea, delicate and tentative as a new moonbeam, began to take shape in my mind. Not an idea born of anger or a desire for confrontation, nor one of tearful pleading for inclusion, but something altogether different. If my family could not, or would not, make space for me in their world, then perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for me to consciously, courageously, create my own. A space built on my own terms. A space filled with my own chosen family. My first, visceral instinct, I confess, was a surge of raw, unadulterated anger. I wanted to call my parents and finally unleash the years of accumulated hurt, the unspoken pain of countless small and large rejections. I imagined posting Gideon's incriminating corkboard photo on every social media platform, exposing the petty cruelty for our entire extended family and their wide circle of acquaintances to witness. I even had a fleeting, dramatic fantasy of showing up uninvited at Starfall Hollow, striding into the midst of their perfectly orchestrated reunion, and forcing a public, uncomfortable confrontation. But as I sipped my coffee, my eyes drawn to a small, faded photograph of my grandparents tacked above my main workbench, their faces alight with a shared, quiet joy, their arms around each other as they stood on the porch of the newly built Starfall Hollow, I knew, with a deep, intuitive certainty, that those reactive, angry impulses would not honor who I was, nor would they align with the gentle wisdom and profound integrity they had so lovingly instilled in me. When people show you their true colors, little Rowan, Grandma Thea used to say, her voice as warm and comforting as a hand-knitted shawl, believe them. Not with bitterness, but with clear-eyed acceptance. And then, choose your own path accordingly. My parents had shown me, repeatedly and unequivocally, where I stood in their estimation. No amount of drama, no tearful recriminations, no angry outbursts, would fundamentally alter that deeply ingrained truth. Instead of allowing the bitterness to take root and fester, I called Maya again. Over a crackling video chat, with the rhythmic sounds of her loom creating a soothing backdrop, I poured out the whole story, my voice catching at times, the rawness of my emotions still close to the surface. I just don't know what to do with all this. This ache, this feeling of being perpetually on the outside looking in, I concluded, gesturing vaguely towards my heart. Maya, her kind, intelligent face framed by a halo of unruly dark curls, listened with her characteristic patient empathy. She adjusted her signature handcrafted silver earrings, a gift from another artisan friend, and leaned closer to the camera. Rowan, my dear friend, you are a creator. It's not just what you do, it's who you are. It's in your very bones, in your soul. When faced with emptiness, creators instinctively seek to fill it with beauty. When faced with neglect, they nurture and cultivate. When faced with exclusion, they build bridges, they open doors, they invite others into warmth and light. What are you suggesting exactly? I asked, a flicker of curiosity, a tiny spark of hope, stirring through the lingering sadness. A small, knowing smile touched Maya's lips, crinkling the corners of her eyes. If I were in your incredibly capable, beautifully creative shoes, my friend, she said, her voice infused with a gentle confidence, I would channel every ounce of that powerful, righteous emotion into making something truly magnificent. Something that would make Elias and Thea's spirits sing with pride. Something that would remind you, most importantly, of your own immense, intrinsic worth, a worth that is utterly independent of anyone else's validation. Her words resonated deep within me, like a forgotten melody suddenly, unexpectedly recalled. They landed not as a challenge, but as a gentle, empowering invitation. After our call, a new, vibrant energy began to course through me, displacing the dull, heavy ache that had settled in my heart. I found myself online, not scrolling through the painful curated perfection of social media, but researching small, independent retreat centers, boutique lodges, and historic inns nestled in the quieter, less traveled corners of the Blue Ridge Mountains, places that exuded warmth, character, and a connection to the natural world. Places that felt like me. If my family could rent 4 auxiliary cabins to accommodate their ever-expanding guest list, why couldn't I, with thoughtful intention, rent an entire space dedicated to a different kind of gathering? It wasn't about competition, not in any petty or vindictive sense. It was about alchemy, the alchemical process of transforming pain into purpose, exclusion into an act of radical, joyful self-inclusion. That's when I stumbled upon it, the Heron's Nest Lodge. A stunning, lovingly restored historic hunting lodge built in the early 1900s, nestled on a secluded bend of the Silver Stream River, just a scenic 40-minute drive from Starfall Hollow. It boasted 6 beautifully appointed guest suites, each with its own stone fireplace and views of the river or the surrounding national forest, a spacious, communal great room with hand-hewn timber beams and a massive river rock hearth, a professional-grade kitchen, and, most enchantingly, a wide, wraparound porch overlooking the murmuring waters of the Silver Stream. And, as if guided by some benevolent cosmic alignment, it was available for the exact week of my family's reunion. The rental fee was substantial, certainly more than I had ever spent on a personal indulgence, making my breath catch in my throat. But I had been diligently, patiently saving for several years, hoping to invest in a larger, more versatile studio space for Hearthstone carvings. This idea of creating a sanctuary, a gathering of kindred spirits, felt infinitely more vital, more urgent, more soul-nourishing. The very next day, I arranged to meet with my friend, Julian, for coffee. Julian owned the Gilded Acorn, one of Asheville's most respected contemporary craft galleries, and had been an early and enthusiastic champion of my work. He was a man of discerning taste, quiet wisdom, and a deeply generous spirit. "You are actually seriously going to do this?" he asked, his usually composed expression alight with a mixture of intrigue, surprise, and genuine admiration after I'd carefully, a little nervously, laid out my tentative, still-forming plan for what I was provisionally calling the Riverbend Artists' Haven. Create an entire alternative, curated gathering the very same week as your family's long-established reunion? Not just any gathering, Julian, I explained, a spark of burgeoning excitement igniting within me, fanned by his receptive energy. I'm envisioning a true haven, a retreat for kindred spirits, for fellow artists and makers, for clients who have become cherished friends, for anyone who seeks solace, inspiration, and authentic connection. We could have informal workshops, perhaps some mindful carving, nature journaling, plein air sketching, maybe even some collaborative storytelling around a bonfire. Everything that Starfall Hollow, in my grandparents' time, used to embody, before it became something else, something more about display than deep connection. Julian's eyes, the color of warm amber, lit up. Rowan, I absolutely adore it. It's inspired. It's courageous. And frankly, it's about damn time you created a space that truly reflects your own beautiful spirit. And I want to help in any way I can. This resonates so deeply with what the Gilded Acorn strives to foster. We spent the rest of the morning brainstorming, our ideas flowing as freely and joyfully as the mountain streams after a spring rain. Julian, with his extensive network, suggested several local chefs known for their commitment to seasonal, farm-to-table cuisine. He also knew a wonderful acoustic musician, a cellist, who often played at gallery openings and might be willing to perform one evening. I thought of other artisans, writers, and thinkers in my own circle who might be willing to share their gifts, to lead small, informal sessions, not as formal instructors, but as fellow travelers on the creative path. We began to sketch out a possible rhythm for the week: gentle morning practices like yoga or qigong by the river, unhurried afternoons dedicated to creative exploration or quiet contemplation, nourishing communal meals, and evenings filled with shared stories, music, and the quiet magic of firelight. You'll need a beautifully designed, heartfelt invitation, Rowan, Julian said, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. Something that captures the unique essence of what you're creating. Make it feel special, personal, an irresistible summons to a sanctuary for the soul. I can definitely handle that part, I smiled, already picturing the design in my mind. Elegant but earthy, infused with the quiet, wild beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains, perhaps incorporating a delicate, hand-carved woodblock print. Over the next week, a whirlwind of focused, joyful activity replaced the dull, persistent ache that had settled in my heart. I took what I called a creative sabbatical from the day-to-day demands of Hearthstone carvings, diverting a significant portion of my hard-earned savings to secure the deposit on the Heron's Nest Lodge. I then dedicated myself to designing a breathtaking digital invitation, which also doubled as a simple, elegant website. It featured one of my own detailed botanical illustrations, a rendering of the rare, delicate Oconee bells that bloomed along the Silver Stream River, and text that spoke of cultivating creativity, fostering connection, and finding solace in nature and shared community. The guest list was a careful, heartfelt, and deeply personal curation. Maya was, of course, the very first name I inscribed. Then other cherished friends from my Penland days, fellow artisans whose work I admired and whose spirits resonated with my own, a few loyal clients whose patronage and encouragement had been instrumental in Hearthstone carving's quiet success, and whose friendship I had come to treasure. My old college roommate, now a thoughtful poet living in Vermont, and her partner. After much soul-searching and a long, quiet walk in the woods, I also decided to extend an invitation to Leo, my younger brother, and his wife, Hannah. He had always possessed a glimmer of understanding, a quiet empathy for my path, however muted by family dynamics, and I hoped this might be a gentle, non-confrontational way to offer him a different kind of familial connection. A space where he too might feel seen and valued for his own unique qualities. With each name I prayerfully added to the list, my sense of purpose and a quiet, profound joy grew stronger. These were people who valued me for precisely who I was, not for who they wished I would be. People who celebrated my unique gifts without reservation or unspoken caveats, who made space for me in their lives, effortlessly and generously. I created a private online group for confirmed attendees, a gentle space to share practical information, logistical details, and a growing sense of shared anticipation. Every element, from the font choice on the website to the wording of the welcome message, was infused with the same meticulous attention to detail, the same understated artistry, the same deep respect for authenticity. That had become the quiet hallmark of Hearthstone carvings. Of course, in the still, dark hours of the night, when the world outside was hushed and my own inner critic grew louder, doubts would occasionally creep in, like chilling mountain mists. What if no one truly wants to come? What if this is perceived as a grandiose, slightly pathetic attempt to replicate a sense of family and belonging that I don't genuinely possess? What if it's a disastrous financial miscalculation that leaves me with depleted savings, a bruised ego, and a heart full of regret? But each time these anxieties surfaced, I would consciously, gently, guide my thoughts back to what was truly at stake: my self-respect, my agency, my refusal to passively, indefinitely, accept exclusion and dismissal as my immutable lot in life. I couldn't control my family's actions, their choices, their perceptions. But I could, with courage, creativity, and a steadfast commitment to my own well-being, choose my response. And I chose to respond not with bitterness or recrimination, but by cultivating beauty, by fostering connection, by creating joy. 2 weeks after Gideon's inadvertently revealing social media post, I had 22 confirmed guests for the Riverbend Artists Haven, scheduled for the exact same week as my family's traditional, now overwhelmingly large, reunion at Starfall Hollow. Leo and Hannah had accepted with genuine, heartfelt enthusiasm. "Rowan, this sounds absolutely wonderful, a true gift," Leo had written in his email. "Hannah and I would be honored to come. It feels like coming home to something we didn't even realize we were missing." My older siblings, Gideon and Isabel, to whom I had not, after much deliberation, extended invitations, remained, as far as I knew, blissfully unaware of my alternative plans. As I finalized the menus with a wonderful local chef Julian had recommended, a woman named Sylvie who specialized in foraged and seasonal Appalachian cuisine, I felt a sense of calm, quiet purpose, a profound rightness that I hadn't experienced in relation to my family or myself for many, many years. For the very first time, I wasn't reacting to their exclusion. I was proactively, joyfully, courageously creating my own luminous circle of inclusion. And it felt like breathing fresh, clean mountain air after being confined in a stuffy, airless room for far too